Good evening to the Chicago Computer Society Linux SIG group. On November the 29th, delayed 1 week because of the holiday. Tonight we got a lot of stuff that we're not going to get all the way through, but I hope you find a lot of information, and I have a handout with all the other stuff we can't get to. Tonight, there's a piece of news. Bob Permick is most knowledgeable on it. It's about Macro and Reflect that some of us use on our computers, whether they're Linux, Mac, or Windows. Bob?
Yeah, I can't reveal everything that was conveyed to me by email. It said at the bottom of the email not to distribute and not to publicize. However, I think it's safe to say that Macrim Reflect Free is being retired. That's posted at their website. Version 8, the current update that you may have gotten, will be the last free update, except if there's a security issue. There will be no further feature updates, and after sometime in 2023, there will be no further stability updates, even if Windows changes.
Okay. Are you going to mention anything about licensing?
That has not been announced.
No, I'm talking about what you were even thinking of doing yourself.
That was based on the confidential information. However, you do have an option. There's a Black Friday sale on. You could get one single PC license and upgrade to Macrim Reflect Home. You'll get some features you'll probably never use. And you will, I won't guarantee this, but I'm guessing your upgrade to version 9 would also be at a reduced price. They also sell support options. You don't automatically get it. So that's a subscription already. And that's $15 a year for the basic. So subscriptions are kind of becoming a thing. And maybe, I can't say for sure, maybe Macrim Reflect will do something like that. They have not made any announcements about pricing or about pricing structures.
Does Macrim work on Linux?
Macrim Reflect will work on Debian family Linux. It will work on NTFS it will work on X file systems and several others. I think it also works on ButterFS, which is used in Fedora. So it's not as reliable on ButterFS, I think. However, that's been around for a while too.
But that's also on the install. You can use the rescue media to back up anything, and I do mean anything. I've got all different kinds of versions, 3 different levels of Linux. I've got Mac OS, I've got Windows 7, 8, well, wait a minute, XP 7, 8.1, 10, and 11.
Yeah, it will clone sector by sector just about anything.
Yeah, and it works just fine. It's stable and reliable.
But if you want the usual kind of backup and restore function, and if you want to operate from within Windows, and you happen to have a mixed drive, then you would probably need the installed version, and it would work only with Windows or certain Linux file systems.
Right.
And personally, for Linux, I have other tools I use.
Yeah, and before you happen to bring up about Macrim Reflect, I started playing with Rescue Zillow that I brought up at a meeting months back. And so far, I've only done the backup and verify. It's worked quite well, but you're talking on these laptops, they only have 16 gig drives minus your formatting and stuff like that. So you're only talking maybe 14 gigabytes being backed up and verified. So it doesn't take very long.
I think they have a 16 gigabyte limit.
I don't
because
remember.
that's what I ran up against. It could not do over 16 gig.
I haven't tried it yet on my desktop, which does exceed 16.
Oh, wait a minute. I know what it is. It cannot mount an image and therefore cannot restore or verify an image if the image size is larger than your RAM. That's its limitation. It works with RAM. It works in a live environment.
I haven't tried a restore yet. And right now, 2 of the 4 laptops are 2 gigabyte in size, and 2 are 4 gigabyte.
Yeah, you'll be fine with those, Tim. As long as you have enough memory.
Well, that's the thing with the 2 gigabyte systems. Right now, I got a machine here that you're going to see tonight. You're not going to believe what I've accomplished with 2 gigabytes of memory.
Yeah.
At any rate, but that's because of what I do on a Chromebook. You're talking somewhere between 18 to 2,000 open tabs across 50 some odd windows on a laptop that's Chrome OS. It's obsolete at the moment. It's got an i5 processor with 8 gigs of memory. And if it wasn't for the 8 gigs, I couldn't do what I was doing. Not for, to that extent. I'm already had to shelve 2 windows of the material that I researched, and as such, if I didn't retire them to the shelf, that's what I'm calling it, the system wouldn't even run. It would crash, and you wouldn't be able to operate it. I just have tricks that I learned to do under Chromium OS and carry forward into all my other systems and browsers. All right. With that all said, tonight there's a lot of YouTube that I'll be showing you for a variety of reasons. I'm giving you a lot of stuff since we will not get together again until the 4th Tuesday of January, since we're not going to do December 2 days after Christmas. At any rate, it's material that I hope you'll go over to begin learning some additional facets and features that I'm trying to bring up there. Now, one of the first things I want to bring up is in one of my laptops, I was in the process of doing a pretty good size update to the Linux, and all of a sudden the power went out on the laptop. We're not talking about in the house, we're just talking inside of that machine. The power disconnected. At any rate, the bottom line there was that when I brought it back up and tried to more or less rerun the update, it didn't work. It said I got one or more locked files. It tells you right where the locked files are at. But I had to figure out how to unlock the suckers. At first I tried deleting the files. That ain't going to work. Trust me. And I think, Dennis, we're getting a little feedback from one of your systems.
It's Dennis. Dennis, turn off one of your mics.
Yeah, I just did.
Also the speaker. Just have one machine with camera and speaker. I got to log back into this friggin' machine. It puts itself to sleep, and you got to log back in every time. On some machines, I've disabled the lock screen, but on some of them I have not. And it's a feature under the screensaver in the Linux. There's a checkbox about 3/4 of the way down the primary screen about locking the system, requiring a person to log back in with their password. And if you take out the check mark, you should be able to get right back into the system and have no problem. Okay.
And under the power plan, you can change that behavior.
Yes. It's also under the screensaver. So you got, like most things in computers, there's more than one way of getting the same thing accomplished. And you just have to learn what they are as far as that goes. I've got to wait for Zoom here to connect back up, and I'll probably have the same problem on the other laptop. Come on.
I was talking about setting up the power plan so that it doesn't go to sleep at all.
Oh, you can do that. There's also a program called Caffeine. You can have your screensaver active, run Caffeine, and it'll never go to sleep. And son of a gun, if this thing did what I think it did, I got to reboot it. There's a bug in Gallium OS which is I don't know if it's known a bug or not, but I found out a way of dealing with it. I just haven't. I've only got it on one computer right now, and I gotta get it put on the other ones. But while I'm playing with this, I got to restart it because the network went bye-bye. I'm gonna see if I can share this other screen. And oops, come on, give me what I want, not what you want. Alrighty. Now, offhand, what I want to do is just show you the desktop. Okay. This desktop, memorize the look of what we in Windows call the taskbar. In Linux is a panel. And what I also want to show is the start menu. Memorize what that looks like. This is LMDE5. It only comes with Cinnamon version desktop, unlike regular Mint comes with Cinnamon, Mate, or XFCE versions. Now, on this system that I'm showing you, and let me try and log in here since I already started it. And this is going to be a royal pain in the butt, but at least on the other system I got a way around it if it happens there. Generally speaking, you see what would be a normal Cinnamon desktop. Now this is a 32-bit version because I want to have a copy that I can put on older hardware. When you get into older hardware, Cinnamon will become too heavy a desktop and slow you down a lot. So I installed also on here Mate, but I can't show you the reboot of this computer that I'm going to do right now. And so I'll drop out here, and then you're going to see me get back in. got to get my head examined here because this is a lot to play with. All right. I was going to show you something, and I'll get to it in a minute. Ooh, I see you still see my old desktop. Come on. There we go. Now, you don't see me logged back in yet. Ah, there it died. Anyway. Okay, I got it partially there. I got to get the browser up and log back in. And that's me coming back in on the laptop. Okay. Come on. My setup isn't exactly ideal. I'm playing here with 4 computers out of 6. Come on. And there's me again on the system that disappeared. Come on. My mouse wants to argue with me. All right. Now, I'm going to share the desktop again, I hope, that this thing cooperates with me. And I will come on. Okay. Now, ignore the background. It's different, yes. But if you look at the panel at the bottom, it should look different. Now, I'll go down to the Start menu. If this doesn't all look different from what you saw the first time, you're asleep. This is the Mate desktop. It's a lighter weight than Cinnamon is and will work on more older systems. Eventually, before I pass away, I'll try and get the XFCE desktop, and I can switch between them between booting up the computer. So I just switched it from the Cinnamon desktop, most of us in MIT 21 or even older versions of the Cinnamon desktop. And as an end result, I needed lighter desktop, and I wanted to have it on the LMDE 32-bit version. This is the only way to do it. And that's the thing. We have in standard Mint 3 different versions. You download the one you want. The thing is, I can download any of the 3, and I can put the other desktops on that version. The base code of the Linux Mint is there. You're just changing which desktop do I want to see at login. So this is doable on virtually all Linux OSs. Try and do that on Windows or Mac. You will have no success because they don't have any such thing. At best, they have some customization, which is less than the customization on any Linux desktop version. Add in, I can change, there's 18 or more different desktops out there. I can probably end up loading up as many of those versions as I want to. Some distros will come with one version, one download, with 3 available desktops already in the distro. And you can add other ones. So I wanted to bring that to your attention. It was important because of another feature I can't get to just a second. I want to get back to the issue. I've got to stop sharing this screen so I can share another. And I don't know what the heck. I don't know why that came up. But anyway. Now, do what I want to do, not what you want to do. All right. Now, if this will cooperate, you got to understand this thing's a very limited machine. It's a 1.1 gigahertz Celeron processor. I got 4 gigs in it and a 16 gig eMMC drive in it. I can change it in this unit because it has a 2.5 inch slot. I can put a 2.5 inch drive of any size in. And supposedly, if I remember correctly, I can upgrade the memory to 16 gigs, but with a 1.1 gigahertz Celeron processor, you got to be nuts as far as I'm concerned. So I'm in here and I'm going to shoot this cookie crap. No matter how many times I do it, it keeps coming up. Now I enlarged this a little bit. I had to figure out how to do it. What you're seeing on the screen there is, I'm going to see if I can slide this over just a bit. Yeah. All right. You see here 2 commands for unlocking a folder or a file. I had both a folder and a file. I had to bring up the terminal. I had to put in the sudo chown dash capital R, my name, which was Tim, colon, and then enter the username again. I don't know why twice, but so I put in Tim again, space, and the name of the folder that was locked, and it unlocked it. Then I went to the file, and basically it's the same exact entry, but now you put in the file name and any extension it has, and it unlocked that. Once I unlocked the folder and that file, I could do anything I wanted to on the system I normally would do. So this, if you end up with the equivalent of a file lock, usually due to an abrupt shutdown of the computer for one reason or another, you're probably going to end up with locked files, and these are the 2 commands you're going to need. Usually when you try and do an update again, it'll tell you you got locked files. They're located in such and such a file directory. And So you bring up your file manager and you then find your way in the file system. Now, normally when we bring up the folder, and I want to bring up the fact too that I stuck Nemo in my versions of, come on, you're not moving. I don't know how well you can see that, but normally this is what it looks like. Somewhere in your file manager, you got file system. You have to go there to be able to find the necessary file that has the locked folders and files. You go into it, run these commands in a command line, and unlock them, and then try again. If you got more locked files than what I had, which was one folder, one file, then you'll have to go do this thing again, find what they are, the exact file name, folder name, run the commands on those folders and files. You have to put in a CD command to that file location before you execute these two commands. If you don't put in CD slash, as an example, bin slash, and some other folder name to see the locked file and folder, then when you run the commands, it's not going to know where it's at unless you put the path name before the folder name and file name in the command. You got to do one or the other. I found it easier since both of them were in the same folder. Do a CD command to that folder location, run the command with just the folder name and just the file name, done. Both unlocked. In the software manager, and this, mind you, is, come on, yeah, you're slower than molasses in January. In here, I did a click on this magnifying glass to do a search, and this thing, until it's ready, it ain't going to recognize my click. Come on. Well, up in the search up here at the top, I stuck in Nemo. I wanted to see if I could do it. Stuck in Nemo, it came up. I installed it, and now I have the Gallium OS file manager called Thunder, and I now also have Nemo. So I have both in the system. I can use whichever one I want to. This is also something you can do in Linux that I don't think you can do in Windows. You can replace File Explorer, but you can't have multiple explorers usually active at the same time. I can. So generally speaking, there's also in the Gallium OS disks, and I installed Gparted because I'm more familiar with it than disk, and it gives me additional features, functions, whatever you want to call it. And so the end result is I'm able to have flexibility that some people might not have because they don't know how to do some of this. And that's what these group meetings are all about, whether they're in person, Zoom, or hybrid, is to share the knowledge. And I'm hoping that some of you guys come up with little tidbits to start at the beginning of the meetings, giving out some tips to everybody who shows up and whoever views the. And you're rotten. All right, I'm back in the saddle again. Now, this is the one I want to show the most because it's got the most garbage on it. And that's the only way you can state it, is the garbage. Okay. Now, on this one, I gotta shrink that down. I'll shrink that one down. Something tells me I got some extras. Oh, I got zoom. Okay. Now, I'm not sure why this is kind of diminished. I don't know what causes it. Sorry, folks. But I hope you can see what the heck I'm doing. Now, I mentioned about the multiple desktops. Bob Premick likes Ubuntu Unity version. Well, Conical has now adopted that version, but the Unity desktop being used is made by, I think, a third party still instead of Conical, unless they took it over. Well, I came across the following in my research and found it kind of interesting. This is a Unity desktop that I'm showing you right now, and look what it says. Bob, you might be interested in this. That's Arch Linux.
I think Unity 7.6 is what's used in Ubuntu Unity.
Yes, but this article says they are making it for Arch now, and they have plans of expanding it to all the other distros.
Yeah, the fellow who develops Ubuntu Unity is pretty much on his own. He's a very young fellow in India. He was 10 years old when he developed this distro. And he is using a form of Unity that is neither Lomari, which is Unity 8, nor this Unity. He has developed his own variant.
That's normal in Linux. Everybody expresses themselves through all the various variations of Linux that are out there. And that includes desktops. At any rate, I thought these were a couple quite interesting things that came up in my research. And I'm going to open up a YouTube here. I'm going to put that Unity to sleep. That's my key. Come on. And the reason I do this is I can only have so many of these tabs open at a time, or this thing's going to freeze up because it's too overloaded with so little memory, and it's all soldered in, so you can't change anything. This I found a guy that creates a lot of YouTube videos. He has a channel. He got burned out, I guess, a while back, but he's back again. And he's got some interesting points on Linux. And that's why I've got a bunch of everything that's on this page of the browser. If you can see it at the top there, you're going to get on a PDF before the meeting ends. I'm not going to go through every one of these. I'm going to skip some of them because they have a different perspective on some of the same material that one of them I will show. Sorry, folks. Okay. This is a real neat perspective if I get this running. Come on, puppy. Go, go, go. What I gotta make certain of. Come on, darn it. I wonder if this thing's playing. Hang on a minute. I don't hear it. Ah, darn it. I gotta share it again. But,
And you're sharing your video sound.
well, that's what I'm trying to get. There we go.
Not those kind of people, just somebody who wants to use the computer.
Do you hear it?
Linux Mint, Ubuntu, that's what we talk about here. They're easy distributions to learn how to use. And generally, I've had a lot of success. I have helped.
I'm gonna start this over.
Late Saturday morning, December the 7th, 2019. And
Yeah,
I
the
just
date
woke up a little
that'll
while
live in
ago,
infamy.
I was going through my email and got a notification that I had a comment on YouTube. And this comment was so typical of hundreds that I have received over the years that it got me
It's
thinking
too
that,
soft.
you know, I really ought to sit down and do a
I don't
video
think I
about
can
this.
boost
I
it.
have covered a lot of these concepts in past videos, but we're going to put it all in one place. And this is in the form of me just kind of rambling on for a bit. There won't be too much to see on the screen other than text, so if you are one of those who likes to listen while you do other things, be my guest. I will read to you any text that pops up.
That's Max.
Now, for those of you who are new to the channel and don't know who I am, I have this little project called Easy Linux that I have been doing for many, many years, and it is my way of contributing to the Linux community. I am trying to help people get started with Linux who want to use it on their desktop at home. These are not people who are nerds necessarily, or they know how to program, or just not those kind of people, just somebody who wants to use the computer. Linux Mint, Ubuntu, that's what we talk about here. They're easy distributions to learn how to use. And generally, I've had a lot of success. I have helped so many thousands of people that I've lost count. I have no idea. But there is a subset that are very hard to work with and very hard to teach. And those are what I call the Windows power users. These are folks that have been using computers since DOS on, and they know everything there is to know about Windows and how to get it to do what they want it to do. But they want to learn how to do Linux. The problem is that they come into Linux expecting Linux to be like Windows. And as the title of this video says, Linux is not Windows. And it doesn't work like Windows. And it doesn't owe anything to Windows. And it's not apologetic that it's not like Windows. Linux is Linux. And you have to take Linux on its own terms. So if you're somebody who is brand new to Linux and you've just stumbled across this video, I'm really glad you're here. If you're somebody who is part of the community and you are trying to help other people get started with Linux, maybe some of what I have to pass along here will help you as well. Or this could all be a colossal waste of time. Who knows? We'll just have to stick around and wait and see. So let's get into our first concept here. I think this is very important to put out right up front. If you go to easylinux.com, you will see this exact slide up there on the page. And it says, Linux is a community, not a product. You can
The
use
sound
but it is not
is off.
It would not be what it is today without conscientious.
What do you mean it's off? You no longer hear it?
Possibly, Tim, when you muted your mic, it turned off all the sound.
That could be, but I think I got to play the sound here. But let me try something. I'll turn the regular mic on, and I'll take here and mute the laptop's local sound and tell me if you hear the sound again. I don't hear it.
I don't either.
Yeah, that's the part of the problem. I got to have this on, and it creates a little bit of an echo, unfortunately. And anyway, I gotta set that back up. Now I don't hear the sound at all. Darn it. Nope, 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 nope. All right, I gotta stop share and reshare, I think. Let's see if that brings back sound. Stop sharing. I can see this is going to be a fun night. All right. All right, now. I got the wrong screen. God darn it. Keep getting the wrong screen because I'm changing another setting. There we go. Got that. Now if we can get the sound back. Ah. Shoot.
Many years, and it is my way of contributing to the Linux community. I am trying to help people get started with Linux who want to use it on their desktop at home. These are not people who are nerds necessarily, or they know how to program, or just not those kind of people. Just somebody who wants to use the computer. Linux Mint, Ubuntu, that's what we talk about here. They're easy distributions to learn how to use. And generally, I've had a lot of success. I have helped so many thousands of people that I've lost count. I have no idea. But there is a subset that are very hard to work with and very hard to teach. And those are what I call the Windows power users. These are folks that have been using computers since DOS 1, and they know everything there is to know about Windows and how to get it to do what they want it to do, but they want to learn how to do Linux. The problem is that they come into Linux expecting Linux to be like Windows. And as the title of this video says, Linux is not Windows. And it doesn't work like Windows. And it doesn't owe anything to Windows. And it's not apologetic that it's not like Windows. Linux is Linux. And you have to take Linux on its own terms. So if you're somebody who is brand new to Linux and you've just stumbled across this video, I'm really glad you're here. If you're somebody who is part of the community and you are trying to help other people get started with Linux, maybe some of what I have to pass along here will help you as well. Or this could all be a colossal waste of time. Who knows? You'll just have to stick around and wait and see. So let's get into our first concept here. I think this is very important to put out right up front. If you go to easylinux.com, you will see this exact slide up there on the page. And it says, Linux is a community, not a product. You can use it for free, but it is not a free ride. It would not be what it is today without conscientious, I can't say that word, conscientious users who contribute to the projects and buy from companies that embrace Linux. So this is a very important concept to understand. If you are coming from a proprietary system like Windows or Mac, then people tend to think of those in terms of large corporations and products. And the problem with that is that when they go into the forums to try and get help, they approach it with an attitude of this piece of garbage doesn't work and how stupid it is. Now, if you're dealing with Windows or Mac, that's pretty common. People like to vent at the man. They have to do that. It just makes them feel better. But when you come into a Linux forum with that attitude, you are kind of pissing all over the community when you do that. And people don't take to it very well because everybody who is using Linux by choice. And we tend to be rather passionate about the ethical reasons why we use Linux or the technical reasons why we use Linux. So don't come into a forum and start, ranting about how Linux is stupid and it should be more like this and it should act like Windows, because it's not going to win you any friends. You have to realize that this is developed by the community for the community, and a lot of the people who participate in the forums are also people who develop bits and pieces of the system. So let's say that you take Ubuntu and you load it on your computer and you're looking at it. You're not looking at Ubuntu. You're looking at thousands of people who contributed to different products that Canonical, the company that distributed Ubuntu, put together to form an operating system that they're calling Ubuntu. So all the little icons on the desktop, the little applets, every one of those goes back to a person who is volunteering their time or working for very little money to create this. It's a labor of love. And you must have respect for that when you go asking questions. It is okay to go ask a question if you don't know. But you are expected in most forums to have done your research first, that you have tried your hardest to find out about what you're asking about. And if you're stumped, somebody will help you. But if it's really obvious that you come into a forum and you haven't taken the time to even Google it to try and figure out what you're talking about, you're not going to get a good response because people don't have time for that. People who volunteer in forums, they are eager to help, but they want to help people who want to help themselves too. So these are all things to keep in mind. So let's go ahead and get into the comment which I received this morning, and I want to read it to you paragraph by paragraph, and then I'll comment on what the person said, because it's a psychological state of mind that's really obvious. I am not going to share the person's name or their YouTube handle, but I have left the comment up, so if you want to go find it, you can. But I'm just going to spotlight this here for what it is. So, the comment is, I am building a new computer and I need a dual boot system. Well, that's your first problem right there. We'll talk about that in a minute. As I have to use some Windows-only programs professionally, I work in the audio-video industry too. Well, guess what? So do I, and I have to use some Windows programs these days, and I have a separate Windows machine that has nothing on it but work, and that's how I deal with that. I want Linux Mint as my other OS. Well, there's another problem right there. I have 3 drives, a fast M2 MME drive for the OS, an SSD SATA drive for high-performance apps, and a fast access data, and a large mechanical drive for storage and less demanding apps. No one in the Linux community can tell me how to do this simple task in Linux, so let's stop there before we move on. First of all, if you are learning Linux, I do not recommend setting up a dual boot with Linux. Unless you are very familiar with how bootloaders work, how partitions are laid out on hard drives, and how file systems are mounted, then I would not recommend doing that, because dual boots can be very tricky, especially when dealing with Windows 10. And you can end up with a bricked system that neither Linux nor Windows will boot, and if you don't know exactly how to recover from that, you're going to be in a world of trouble. And I can tell you for sure that this person who is writing this does not understand those things, and he does not need to be setting up a dual boot. I do not recommend dual boots. I think the best way to learn how to use Linux is to take a computer, get a used computer, a cheap little laptop, whatever, load Linux on it, and take the time to play around with it, figure out how the system works, and keep all of your production stuff, your main stuff, on your Windows or your Mac machine or whatever you're currently using. Well, those are your 2 choices, so it would be one of the 2. But don't try and mix Linux and Windows right off the bat, because it can get you in a lot of trouble. You really need to take your time with Linux and approach it slowly. Remember what we said at the beginning of the video. Linux is not Windows. So he says he wants Linux Mint as his other OS, and then he says he has 3 drives in the computer. Well, to do what he wants to do doesn't work the same way in Linux as it would in Windows, which is probably why no one in the Linux community can tell me how to do that. I'm using his words there. Because you're trying to apply the way Windows handles things to a system that doesn't work that way. In Linux, you don't decide where your applications are installed. The system decides that, and it puts it in appropriate directories, usually /user/bin, which lives on the same drive usually as your operating system. You can, in the installation process, very easily break out your home directory where all your personal data is stored on another drive. And you can also have another drive in the system that you mount somewhere else. You could, within the file system, create a new mount point. Then you could call that data, for instance, and then you could mount your large drive. There are many, many different ways to do what you're trying to do. So maybe the reason why you're so confused is because you're not taking the time to learn the basics of how the system works, which is why you need to install it in a separate computer or even in a virtual machine and break it several times. Get in there and play with it. Learn the basics before you start thinking, well, I'm going to create this big elaborate system. You don't have the know-how to do that just yet. So let's roll on. I would like to be able to use the same sort of organization for Linux apps and data according to the application demands. Well, it doesn't work that way. I mean, we just covered that. This is not how it works. Apps in Linux, first of all, I mean, it's overkill what he's talking about anyway. I mean, if he makes his root directory with his OS, that that M2 drive, and then he's got a fast SSD for his data, that's going to be one fast system. And Linux is faster than Windows anyway. But anyway, I am about to give up on being able to do so. Well, that's probably a good idea since it doesn't work that way. Every Linux for Noob video article, etc., I have seen starts off with, "This is so easy, a caveman can do it," but within 2 minutes is making assumptions and throwing about arcane knowledge, Linux knowledge, that makes it impossible for new people to follow. Well, whose fault is that? It's your fault. It's not the person making the video's fault. I know for a fact that the video that this was posted on is pretty straightforward about how it works, and I go through and explain it as best I can. But obviously, you are missing some very basic things here that you need to go off and learn about before you attempt to manipulate the system this way. You really have to start from scratch, okay? It just seems like the average Linux instructor really has no idea how the average Joe or Jill who did not spend their summer vacation teaching themselves C++ actually needs from a computer. What they actually need, I guess, is what he means there. Well, that's not true. I mean, that is one of the things that I have focused on this channel for a long time is trying to help people who want to do regular stuff that you would do on commercial systems or proprietary systems, whatever you want to call them, that you can do it on Linux. So that's a big focus here. The thing that a lot of people don't see, and this particular line brings up, is the fact that what you need from a computer may not be what I need from a computer, and it might not be what Bob down the street needs from a computer. And a lot of people who use computers for a very long time come up with very specific workflows, and they don't want to change it. And this person who wrote this is obviously somebody just like that. They want an exact way of running the system, and they're not open to new ideas. Anyway, as a result, Linux is doomed to remain a side cult, and people who hate that Microsoft reads our emails, follows us through the web, and sells our privacy to the highest bidder are doomed to remain with them. Not because Linux isn't an awesome and acceptable alternative, but because no one has the ability to teach old Windows and Mac users how to even do the basics. No, it's attitude. It's attitude. Stop. It's your attitude. If you come into it expecting it to be something that it's not, if you have an attitude that you are too good to learn something new, if you don't realize that it is a learning curve that takes time, that it's not something that's going to come to you in a day or two, you're going to end up being very frustrated. People who do well with Linux, regardless of their experience with computers in the past, are those who realize that it is a journey and not a destination. They realize that there is a lot to learn, and they're going to have to start with the basics and work up, and they're going to have to take it very slow. And unfortunately, the more you know, the harder it is to learn. I would much rather work with a 10-year-old kid than somebody like this person who's writing this comment. And the reason why is because they don't have any preconceived notions, and they learn very quickly. My son is a very good example with that. He is becoming an Ubuntu power user. He runs his games. He's got a gaming PC. He is learning how to do this, and it's come to him very naturally. And when he has to sit down in front of some other system, he feels lost. He doesn't know what to do. But if you sit him down in front of Ubuntu, which he has been using literally since he was 5, and he's now 13, he doesn't think twice about it. He's customized his desktop. He's got all his games set up the way he wants to. He customizes his games. It's pretty amazing. And he was not very hard to teach, but somebody who has worked with other computers for 30 years, they're the hardest to teach. And our person goes on and says, "Sorry for the rant, but though I have had computers since I had a Texas Instrument TI-99, I have never been so frustrated as I have been trying to learn the basics of usability of Linux from people professing to teach basics to new users in the Linux community. Mount and then unmount. We don't have to mount and unmount drives in Windows. What does that even mean? And yet, if these things don't happen, it is bound to result in frustration and failure." Well, once again, something is not wrong just because you don't understand it. It is not Linux's fault if you don't understand how the system works. It simply is not. It's your fault. You need to go off. Okay, so here is a very specific thing right here. It says mount and unmount. That is one of the things that makes Linux very different from Windows. Windows will take any storage device you plug into the system, internally or externally, and arbitrarily assign a letter to it and mount it to the system so you can see it. That's not very secure. You can take a Windows system and have it mount something the way it's done in Unix and Linux systems, which means to make a device appear within the directory structure. You can do that. Most people who run Windows don't do it that way. But the reason why Linux mounts and unmounts is because it is the most secure and the most flexible way of doing it. And it gives the user a great deal of power that you don't have in Windows. The only thing in Windows that you can do if you're going to keep drive letters is maybe figure out what letter you want it to be, and it starts to get complicated. Whereas you can have a Linux system that has many network shares and lots of devices and partitions that are mounted throughout the file system, and it's all seamless. And as far as the end users are concerned, they don't care where the data comes from as long as they get it. And it's called obfuscation, and it's done on purpose. It's part of the system. It adds a layer of security and flexibility that you do not get in Windows unless you really know the Windows system and you really are willing to go down into the system and do some different things. You can make it do it, that's what I'm trying to say, but it's not native as it is in Linux. And so what you need to do, if you come across something that you don't understand, like mounting and unmounting, then stop and go online and use friendly Mr. Google to actually go and learn the basics of how this works and why it works the way it does. And then you are armed with that information. And then you can come back to my video or somebody else's video, and then you can learn how to do what you're trying to do. Okay? Don't blame the teacher if you're too stupid or stubborn to follow along. It's not their fault. You did not come to class prepared. Anyway, I watched this video hoping to learn how to utilize various drives for different purposes in Linux, and I still have no clue how to do that. No one in the community can tell me how to do the simplest task in Windows on Linux, because Windows isn't Linux, and Linux isn't Windows. That's the only reason people aren't migrating to Linux in droves. Well, I hate to break this to you, but people are migrating to Linux in droves. By the thousands every day. It may not be showing up in the national media and you might not be hearing about it, but I've been watching this for a long time now and people are migrating to Linux. I guess the answer is to get a 50 gigabyte spinner drive, install Linux, whenever I need to check email and surf the web and write documents on it like my old 386-25, because putting a high-performance video editing app on one drive and a scratch drive on another drive is evidently impossible. Well, it is absolutely possible what you want to do. It's just that you don't have the skills to do it yet, and you obviously need to go back and learn the basics. So yes, and I have said this from day one, the best way to learn Linux is to go get that 50 gigabyte spinner and put it in that little computer and use it to check email, and then take the time to learn and experiment on that machine before you expect to be able to do big things with a big machine like you're talking about. You've got to walk before you can run. And in some cases, you'll have to crawl before you can walk. And that is the problem that you're dealing with. It's not Linux. It's not the people trying to teach you how to use Linux. It's your attitude that you are bringing to Linux. And attitude is everything when you're trying to learn Linux. The people who do well on Linux are those who see it as an adventure, they see it as a challenge, and they like to learn. and they're willing to take the time to learn how to use the system and get the most out of it. And do not expect instant results, and especially do not expect it to be like what they're used to, because it's not. So that is the point of this video. And my response to this person was very short and sweet. I simply said that a lot of what I said attitude is everything when you're trying to learn Linux, and if you approach it too quickly, you're going to get frustrated. The information is out there. Basically, Linux is not Windows, and it's going to take time to learn it. And I'm expanding on that in this video. And there are a lot of people out there like that, which is, sometimes I can talk them down. There was one fellow who kind of came to me, and he had a bit of a tude, and he was kind of hard to deal with. And then I kind of worked with him real slow. He was, although he had this sort of attitude at first, he kind of caught on to the fact that, oh, wait a minute, this is different. And now he's got Linux doing everything he needs him to do. I mean, he started out sounding like this guy. But then I was able to work with this fellow. He was, this guy's saying, ugh, I give up. Well, goodbye, see you later. I mean, if that's your attitude, please go back to Windows or buy yourself a Mac. It's not, sure, I'd like to see people come to Linux. I'd like to see new people in the community. I'd like to see more people using it. Absolutely. But don't bring your attitude. We don't want that. We have enough of that inside the community already. We don't need it from outside. So if you're going to bring that with you, that's fine. Give up. Walk away. Bye-bye. See you later. I don't want to deal with you. And a lot of the other people who run forums and try and help people in the community don't want to deal with it as well. And it's just that simple. So anyway, I have no idea what's going to happen with this person. Maybe he'll go off and think about it a little while and come back with a fresh attitude. That tends to happen on occasion. And there are some people that I thought would never learn how to use Linux that did, so I always hold out hope. So guys, I hope that helps a little bit. I mean, I hope that I have shared some positive things along the way. I'm trying to turn a negative into a positive with this video for sure. You can learn Linux. It's not hard. It's just a matter of being willing to start at the bottom and work your way to the top. You're going to start over. It doesn't matter what you already know. What you already know doesn't apply. It's a different system. Your feedback is always welcome, and you can check us out at easylinux.com. We have Easy Talk, which is our very own forum, which we run from the OS on down. It's free, secure, and fun. Please be sure to give Easy Linux a like on Facebook if you are a Facebook user as well. Always lots of cool things happening over there. And I am doing this other job these days. As I have said, I am on the air at b999fm.com in the evenings. And so I'm going to go ahead and put a link in this description if you want to check that out. Last video I was talking about that, but I'll throw the link in this one as well. So thank you for watching, and we will do this again soon.
Any comments?
Good video.
I was very surprised when I stumbled across it, played it, and what it said. I haven't come across another video, anything close to it.
Yeah, he gets right to the core of it. You got to learn how to do something different.
Well, and that's the thing. Though it shouldn't be too difficult, going from Windows to Mac or Mac to Windows is much easier than either of those going to Linux, because it is quite a bit different in many ways. And
Well, I must say something.
go ahead.
When I first came to to Linux, I was coming from Windows either XP or 7. Actually, it was Windows 8, because that's when I found that Windows was becoming difficult to learn. It had a steep learning curve at that moment where Windows 8.0 came in with the brand new jarring interface. And the interface in Linux, being so Spartan in many distros, has often put people off. And they don't realize that Windows actually does a lot of what Linux does, and it's actually doing it pretty much the same way under the hood. But as they said, proprietary operating systems tend to obfuscate. They don't want the end user knowing the nitty-gritty details. And they certainly don't want us re-engineering the nitty-gritty details. But in Linux, on every PC I've used it on, I've had to modify something inside the system in order to make it really work well. And that's what a lot of people don't really want to have to do, open up the hood and tinker with it, just like most people won't work on their own cars.
Well, leading into that statement is part of the reason why I had brought up before, you can try and avoid the command line. And there are distros that you can pretty much do normal Linux operations with never touching the command line. But the command line, bottom line, is where the power is at. And this guy here, Joe, is a person who helps out other people. And I think in one of the other videos, he brings up the fact that don't be too surprised that if you ask for help, you're going to find out I'm going to have you open up a terminal, run some commands, and give me information back from what those commands do, because they will give me information I can't find in a GUI or not easily. And that's what you got to understand in Linux. Even in, if you came from MS-DOS, you had a good background in Windows, but most people stopped doing any of the DOS stuff in Windows. I at least do some now and then, and I've done more since Windows 8, 10, and 11. And I will have to continue to do so because, for example, SFC, to find out if the critical files in Windows to boot up your computer to a login screen, let alone your desktop, if one or more of them have become corrupt, and correct it if possible. And it's not always possible for SFC to do it. It depends upon when you catch the corruption. It's like cancer. The earlier you catch cancer, the more curable it is. The longer you let it persist, the worse things get, and it starts becoming impossible to undo the corruption. And that's where you have to learn how to do an in-place update or install. Some call it update, some call it an install. And there's two ways of doing it in Windows. Internal to a running Windows system, or externally by booting up off the media and then doing the in-place update. But it's repairable. It's just frustrating, and how much time you may have to spend before you can do the work it is that you want to do on the computer in the first place. And I've been finding more and more minor corruption after most updates of Microsoft's updates. So I run SFC /scan now, and if it finds there was any corruption, it gets rid of it. Done. And if I don't, eventually it may say I corrected some of it, but I couldn't correct all of it. Now you may be faced, if a problem shows up, having to do that in-place installation to get your system back to normal operation. and it takes longer than most people think. I'm working with another person with their system that's been very out of date. They were thinking going out and buying a new computer, but that computer would be as screwed up as this one is that he's got right now down the road. He can't believe how much I've already done. I'm not done with him, but the holidays have interrupted us. So we got to get back together again. Any further comments? All right, I'm going to bring up another one, and there's a reason for bringing this one up. Come on. This system is pretty loaded.
Greetings and salutations. Thanks for clicking on the video. I sure do appreciate it. Today I want to talk about one of my favorite things about working with the Linux operating system, and that is the fact that it has the ability to bring new life to hardware that would ordinarily be put on the scrap heap if the only thing that was available to run it was the Windows operating system. This picture you're looking at is something I did a while back for a blog post, and it's basically all of my computers running the system monitor, and I took screenshots and collaged them together in GIMP so that you could see all of the different machines. So we start out with one CPU, and then two, and then three, and then four, and all of them run Linux, and all of them run quite well, and that's the whole point of that picture. So I wanted to explain that since I'm using it as the thumbnail for this particular video. Now, this is my latest project, what I have been working on here, and it is a machine that I've actually had in the house for a long time. It's my fiance.
By the way, this is a 7-year-old one. I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of old videos. They may seem old to you, but a lot of times it's just as pertinent as it is with the latest, greatest version of Linux.
Says she had it over at her mom's house. We went and got it, and when I first got the machine, it was running Windows 7 Ultimate, and it had 512 megabytes of memory in it. I couldn't believe the thing actually booted up, but it did.
Yeah.
And so what I did with it was, the original thing was to keep the Windows installation going because she has some programs that she wanted to use that are Windows only, and she was just warming up to Linux at that time. So what I did to the machine was I just opened it up, cleaned all the dust out of it, made sure that everything was okay, and I happened to have some memory, so I bumped it up to 2 gigabytes of memory. Now the motherboard itself can take up to 4 gigabytes of memory, but that's what I had on hand, so I just bumped it up to 2, and Windows 7 will run pretty good on 2 gigabytes. I mean, not the fastest thing in the world, but for what she wanted to do with it, fine, right? And this machine is probably about 10 years old at this point because the motherboard is one of those transitional motherboards that has SATA on it, and it also has IDE. So it's one of those dual controller boards that were available around 2005, 2006 when the hardware people were making the transition from the IDE controllers for drives and SATA, which is nice because that means that I've been able to kind of swap things in and out. The hard drive that came with the machine was an 80 gigabyte drive, believe it or not. And that was what Windows 7 was on. Well, it's still on because the Windows 7 drive is still in the machine. But what I did was I had a hard drive that I've had forever, which was a Western Digital Caviar, 160 gigabyte. And it's 10 years old, and it won't die. I've had it in and out of service for so long, it's not even funny. So I took that hard drive, and I put it in one machine and loaded Linux Mint on it. This has been about a year ago. and then I transplanted that drive into that machine and booted it up from that drive, changed the boot sequence. And that's how I got Linux into the machine, because a curious thing about it is that I cannot get the DVD or CD-ROM drive to work in the machine, and I didn't have a USB stick at the time that I was doing the install. I end up giving those away to clients all the time. I go get a bunch of them, and then I'll do somebody's machine and I'll put some software on it and I'll just hand it to them. So what I've started to do now is that if I work on somebody's machine, I actually say, okay, bring me a USB drive that I can put your stuff on. But anyhow, that's beside the point. I got the machine up and running, and the trick about working with the drives is that it's an old style power supply. So I just happen to have this Caviar drives that has the old style power supply plug on it, and it has a SATA port on it at the same time. So it's SATA with the dual power supply. So that's how I got the machine working. And anyway, long story short is that it actually works quite well. And I just upgraded it not too long ago to Linux Mint 17.2, which I thought, I'm not going to be able to do nothing with this old piece of junk machine. But as I have used it and tweaked it a little bit, it has become quite useful. And it sits in the dining area in the kitchen, And this is the go-to machine. Anybody needs to look something up, they go to this. I use it all the time to play music and do whatever I want to with it. The point of this ramble is that this is a machine at this point in time that would ordinarily be on the scrap heap somewhere. Yet I am running Linux Mint 17.2 with the very latest Cinnamon 2.6.13. I've got the latest kernel, the latest Ubuntu server kernel, which is 3.16.045. It does one Celeron processor, says it's clocked at 3.33 gigahertz, 2 gigs of memory, and the Intel Corporation integrated graphics controller that's on the card has 128 megabytes of video memory. So that is the entire machine, and it works. This machine, by the way, would run Windows 7, but there were no drivers available for Windows 7 for the video card. None at all, as a matter of fact. And I had to, that's one of the reasons I pushed to actually put it on Linux, is that Cindy was complaining. She was saying, well, the machine won't play video right, and it won't do this and it won't do that. And I kept telling her it's because you don't have any 3D acceleration. Everything's rendering in software. You got one processor, and that's making it so it doesn't work. So there's been a huge improvement switching it over to Linux Mint, simply because of the fact that you have a video driver that works, which is built into the Linux kernel, and I never had to look for it, okay? So let's talk a little bit about this, because it is something that I like to do. I love turning what would be a junk machine into something that's running modern software. Now, yes, before we go any further and I get into anything else, on that machine, there are those of you watching this video who are probably saying, why aren't you running a lighter distro like Linux Lite or Lubuntu or something like that? And I like Linux Mint with the Cinnamon desktop. I'd rather lose a tiny bit of performance and have the interface that I like. And it's kind of fun to see it work on that machine anyway. It's surprising how well it does work, as a matter of fact. When I first put it in, it was very shaky. And now that I have played with it for a while, it's not. The only thing you'll notice, of course, is the load time because of the old hard drive. It's an old spinning hard drive. And so in other words, it takes a little while to boot. It takes a little while to log in and log out and open applications and things like that. But the only other thing beyond that you really notice is that sometimes if you play very HD type video and the machine's doing something in the background, it'll chop. It'll pause or whatever, but it's one processor. So that wouldn't change even if I was running Lubuntu. It wouldn't make any difference, because a lot of the modern browsers like Google Chrome, they're looking for a multi-thread processor. That doesn't have it, so there you go. That's what you're going to get. Anyway, let's talk about the minimum requirements for running Linux on your old junk machine. Let's say that you got somebody who gives you one, you find one in a closet somewhere and you want to play with it. According to the Ubuntu website here, and we are on the community help wiki, very basic is 700 megahertz processor. An Intel Celeron processor is good. 512 megabytes of RAM, 5 gigabytes of hard drive space, 1024 by 768 screen resolution, and a CD or a DVD drive or a USB port or for the installer media. Now, if you have a machine that doesn't have a CD or DVD, or it doesn't work, and you cannot boot it off USB because some of the really older XP machines won't, then you can always take the hard drive out, or any hard drive that'll work, and install it on another machine and then put it in. The trick is, do not load any proprietary drivers. You can move installs of Linux from one machine to the other. Very easy. I do it all the time, as a matter of fact, by just replacing the hard drive and booting off the next machine. But there cannot be any proprietary drivers installed, because if there is, then the system will lock up when it boots and it won't work, because whatever you're driving with the proprietary driver is not going to be there. So that's how you do it. So install it. Don't install any drivers and then move it, and it works fine. Now, I take exception with these particular specifications here, because I can tell you right now that if you run a modern Linux desktop like Cinnamon or GNOME or Unity with 512 megabytes of RAM, you're going to bang your head up against the wall. It'll drive you nuts. And I don't care how good your video card is either, because it just takes forever. So let's scan down here and get some more realistic numbers. We're talking about the Unity desktop, and this also applies to Cinnamon, and it applies to GNOME. GNOME is actually, Ubuntu GNOME is actually the biggest memory hog of them all. Cinnamon and Unity, they're about the same, although I have found that Cinnamon is a bit peppier than Unity. But it's, when you go to GNOME, like a straight GNOME desktop, you better have some memory in the machine. So this is like what, a 1 gigahertz processor. They're talking about a Celeron here. They're talking about 1024 megabytes of RAM system memory. No, actually, they're talking about MB there. 3D acceleration capable video card with at least 256. Well, I'm getting away with 128, and pretty much every virtual machine in the world runs about 128 megabytes of video memory, and you can get relatively decent performance out of that. No, none of these machines are going to be gaming machines, kids. You're not going to be able to do that, but 90% of the people who use computers, like if you're putting the computer together for somebody else, what are they doing with them? They're surfing the web, they're watching an occasional YouTube video, listening to music, stuff like that. You don't need the fastest video performance to do that. You will need really fast video performance if you expect HD quality video, or if you're playing games or whatever, But people who go out and buy brand new computers today, 90% of the time, they only use 10% of the hardware capability. It's like the rest of it's just wasted. It's like people that go out and buy computers that have 16 gigabytes of RAM in them. Now, it's cool that you can get a computer with 16 gigabytes or 32 gigabytes or whatever the upper limit is on some of these machines these days. But when you really stop and think about it, or at least in my experience, I've never done anything that's ever... the most memory that I have in any one of my machines is 8 gigs. And I keep an eye on how much it uses. I put 8 gigs in the machine simply because of the fact that I was running a bunch of virtual machines at the time. I actually needed that to make all those virtual machines run at the same time. I was playing around with server farms and stuff like that. So that's why I got the 8 gigs. And when I got the 8 gigs, that was hot stuff, man. That was like a few years ago now. So I just don't really I really have to scratch my head and wonder why anybody needs anything over 816 gigs. But if you're a gamer or something like that, if you are doing a lot of video editing, something that slurps up a lot of memory, maybe you need that. Awesome, whatever. But for the average person, 4 gigs is a nice place to be with Ubuntu and any kind of Ubuntu distro. you can get away with 2 gigs. I'm running it on 2 gigs right now. Just make sure that you have a swap space enabled. And if you can actually make it work on 1 gig, but the trick with that is that when you partition your drives, you need to make sure that you have a huge swap space. In other words, if the machine has 512 to 1 gigabyte of memory, and now we're not talking about running a Unity desktop here, guys. We're talking about running something like Linux Lite or whatever. But what I do is I always make a huge swap area on the drive. And when I say huge, I mean like 2.5 gigabytes. And that way the system has plenty of room to work. If your computer has 1 gigabyte of physical memory, then I'd give it 2.5 gigabytes of swap to work with, 2 or 3, so it has plenty of room. In other words, if you got 2 gigabytes of swap, give it an extra gigabyte or physical memory, give it some more swap space, like 3 gigs or something like that. No, I don't think you need to double it. Some people would say, well, if I have 2 gigs, then I should give it 4. If you want to do that, that's fine, but we're just talking about making sure the machine runs. If you get above 4, at about 4 gigabytes, then the swap space needs to be a little bit bigger than 4, like give it 5, and then above that, it's optional. In other words, if you have 8 gigabytes of RAM in your computer, you don't really need to give it 8 gigabytes of swap space. You could give it 2 and it'll work fine. The only difference is that it's not going to hibernate. Anyway, I'm getting off on a bunch of crap. Let's go back to talking about this. So realistically, we want as much memory in the machine as we can get. So if you get one of these old machines, the first thing you need to do is figure out where you can get, you can max out the memory in the machine. Processor speed is not going to affect your performance as much as the 3D acceleration, video memory, and memory in the machine. You can have a 1 gig processor, and you can have 256 megabytes here, or like a nice video card in it, and it will perform as good as a 3 gig processor with a crappy video card with not enough acceleration, because so much of what you see on your screen has to be processed by the GPU that you need to take as much of that off of the main processor as possible. Hope that made sense, but I know what it means. All right, so this is the basic requirements here, and I had a couple of other things up here to talk about. First of all, where do you get these machines? People give them away. Businesses are downgrading, trying to get away from Windows XP, or upgrading rather. They're trying to get away. Maybe they're going to Windows 7, even though Windows 7 is now going into long-term support mode. So these machines come up all the time, or you can just go on eBay. eBay is an awesome place to look because people are selling them. And like, here's this groovy little Dell here. I'd like to see what's in that thing, actually, to tell you the truth. Some of these are really cool little machines to play with. Here's an old Dell. I remember I had one of those in my office when I was working for a company about 5-10 years ago. So there's plenty of computers to choose from. What you're looking for in hardware is you're going to have better luck with Intel, because the Linux developers work very closely with the Intel Corporation, and the Linux kernels pretty much support all the Intel hardware, and you're probably going to not run into too many major issues. But this machine that I'm recording this video on is all AMD. And when I first got the machine, now this machine now is 5 or 6 years old, gang. So this one could be argued, it could be go on the scrap heap too, but it works fine. When I first got this machine, I was having all kinds of problems with Linux drivers. And so I ran it on Windows 7 for a long time. Didn't do too great with the Windows 7 drivers. But now, when I switched it over to Linux full-time, I have noticed that the open source drivers for the old video card and everything actually work better than the drivers that I had when I was running Windows and had the proprietary drivers in many ways. They work better. So it's kind of the luck of the draw. They tell you to go for Intel, but try it on your AMD hardware and see what it does. It might work. Now, you're probably not going to get a proprietary driver for that from AMD because they don't support their older cards, but the open source drivers actually are not bad. So look for Intel hardware. Don't worry about whatever memory they have installed in the machine. Most machines that are 10 years old could handle at least 2 gigs of memory. So you can get an old machine even if it has 512 megabytes in it, which for Windows XP 10 years ago was not a bad deal. You could actually make it work pretty well. But anyway, you can usually expand these out to at least 2 gigabytes, 1 or 2, and that should be enough to make your Linux work. So I had something else up here, and we're talking about parts now, because you're going to you might need to be finding some things like hard drives and DVD drives and IDE stuff and things like that. I've actually found that Amazon is a great place to look, and you can find some pretty cool prices here. And I've bought a bunch of parts off of Amazon over the last couple of years. I've pretty much been able to find anything I wanted to. And now, when you're buying new old stock parts, which is basically what an IDE hard drive is going to be, you're always taking a risk. But I bought one not too long ago, and it worked out pretty good. So don't spend a great deal of money. I mean, my advice would be don't get the hottest video card that was available for a machine that's 5-10 years old, because you don't know what you're going to get. If you have to upgrade the video or you want to, look for something that's not going to break the bank. If it shows up and it doesn't work for some reason, then you haven't lost much. And that's kind of the way to look at it. I mean, if you got the machine for free in the first place, it's kind of like catch as catch can. I've worked on computers for a long time, so I've actually got, or had, I don't anymore, but I had boxes and boxes full of parts. So a lot of the times if I need something, I'll go scrounge something up. I'm out of parts though, so I have to actually go buy them now because I don't do as many machines as I used to. But there's all kinds of stuff that you can find on Amazon, and this is actually a really fun hobby. And then you could do these machines and not put a whole lot of money into them. If you get them up and running nice, here's something you can give to grandma so she has a computer. Here's something that you can give to a kid that just wants to play. Put Linux on them and turn them loose. It's great. Kids, by the way, with Linux are awesome because they don't have the prejudices that people have who have been using computers for a while. It's very hard to get somebody who's used Mac or Windows for a long time to switch over, because they just have so many prejudices going in. But if you take a kid, and not saying that they don't know Windows, I mean, they just haven't been using it for years. It hasn't become muscle memory to make the computer work. They just take to it. They just sit down and go, oh, this is the way it works. Okay, that's the way my kids are anyway. So it's just a lot of fun, and it's one of the things I love about it. You can take an old machine and you can run modern hardware on it that is, modern software on it that's totally up to date, ready to go right now. You don't have to worry about security issues. And as near as I can tell, this is something that's going to continue to be a part of Linux for a long time. So Ubuntu 14.04 and Linux Mint, they are supported until 2019 before you have to move to another distro, right? Or you're going to have to. In other words, if you have a machine that's working on 14.04 right now, you don't even have to think about reinstalling it until 2019. But if you wanted to, when the next LTS comes out, the 16.04 version, I think that you could probably install that in its place and it would work just fine. I've played with 15.10 and I kind of know the direction that they're going. This should be something that continues to happen. So imagine having an operating system that will allow you to run 15-year-old hardware but be the latest and greatest at the same time. But, of course, I have to say this before we close out this video, because if I don't say it, somebody's going to point it out in the comments, and I don't want to hear it. Of course, if you want the absolute best performance out of your computer, and that's a big deal to you, go to system76.com and buy one of their new machines with an i7 processor in it. 4 cores with 4 cores with 2 threads apiece and 8 threads and all that other stuff. Because this is what's going to give you the best performance, and they're designed to run on Ubuntu. However, the kind of machine that I would like to have from System 76 is going to cost me $1,500 to $2,000, depending on whatever it is. I don't have that kind of cash to spend on a computer. Not many people do. And what I have found is that doing the junk computers, I've built a computer network in my house, and I've probably paid over the last year for parts, computers, and everything about $300 to do the whole thing. Because I did buy a laptop, which is $150. I bought some parts for that, bought some parts for the other junk machine. I'm always, picking up little pieces, bits and pieces. So I have this computer network in my house that I've probably paid $250, $300 to maintain and keep running, and actually add 2 machines to in the last year. Replace 2 machines, rather. So anyway, thank you for watching the video. I know I rambled on a bit, but I figured you guys might get a charge out of hearing it. It's something that really, it's my favorite aspect of working with Linux, is the fact that it works on all this different hardware. So thanks for watching. Talk to you again soon.
Any comments? What did you guys think of it?
Well, of course, the definition of what's up to date has been updated a bit since Ubuntu 14.04, but
Yeah.
otherwise, a very relevant video.
Yeah.
One thing I would say about choosing older hardware, if you want to choose something that's like a foundling or an old machine, I try to go with business class laptops, not consumer class. Consumer class don't age well.
I get a mix on that. Sometimes I got consumer class that works just fine, and otherwise I do have a fair amount of business class equipment. It varies. All right, I don't know how much further we're going to get, but there's definitely one thing I want to bring up in this before we go tonight. Not in this video here, it's one further, and it has to do with those using a laptop, which includes the 4 that I've got here that are former Chromebooks.
Greetings and salutations. I hope this video finds you doing well wherever you are in the world. So you want to learn Linux. We're going to get right down to basics today. This video is for the person who is just now becoming Linux curious. You're looking at your current computing situation and you're wondering if Linux could benefit you. You haven't even stuck your toe in the water yet. If that's you, I'm glad you're here. If you already use Linux, chances are you're helping others learn how to use Linux. And what you'll hear in this video will probably help you help others. So I'm glad you're here as well. Who the hell am I? I think that is a fair question, and I think we ought to answer that one before we get into the main topic. Because otherwise, I'm just another voice on YouTube, and why the hell should you listen to what I have to say? Well, I've been administrating computer systems for 25 years. I went to school for radio engineering in 1986 and ended up moving over to programming. I've always been somewhere between the back shop and the main studio. And along the way, I have worked with automation systems, scheduling systems, audio and video editing systems, and the networks that tie it all together. I've been using Linux for about 15 years. I started using Linux full-time in 2012. Before that, I had it running here and there, but after 2012, I had a machine running Linux that I used every single day. I've helped thousands of people get started with Linux through Easy Linux. That is a program that I kicked off in 2015. It's sort of a non-profit project. And what I started out doing was installing Linux on people's computers. I would help them to do it over the phone, and I'd walk them through the process. The idea was that if they had a good solid install, that they would have a better chance of having a more pleasant Linux journey and they would stick with the system. That turned out to be absolutely true. And working with all those people taught me a lot about how people interact with their computers and how they learn. Now, I don't do that these days. I don't do any one-on-one anything. I have another job. I simply don't have time to do that. But I still help people through email and comments here on YouTube, all kinds of places. I've posted hundreds of Linux-related videos right here on this channel. If you are already subscribed, chances are that's why you're here. I do videos about audio equipment as well, especially turntables and records and cassettes and things like that, because I have a fascination. Like I said, I started out wanting to be an engineer, and to this day I'm still fascinated with any audio recording device. I've published several bash scripts. Now, these are little programs that you can run in your terminal on your Linux system that do all kinds of groovy things. Bash is the shell that runs in your terminal. On most systems, that's the default. It's also a computer language that you can use to write programs. So I've been fascinated with bash scripting for the last few years, and if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to easylinux.com and you look at the bash scripts page. That's everything that I have written so far and published. So that's a bit about me. Let's get into the main subject. First of all, I want you to understand that you don't switch to Linux, even though that's what you hear all the time. People say, well, I'm sick of this, I'm going to switch to Linux, and people are trying to get people to switch to Linux. It is more accurate to say that you should migrate to Linux. And the reason is, if you switch to Linux, then that would imply that you're going to just download a Linux distribution, blow out whatever your current installation is, whether that be Windows or Mac, and then put Linux on top of it and start from scratch. That is a recipe for disaster. If you do that, you're going to be banging your head up against a wall. You're going to find yourself very frustrated after a while. It is much better to start using Linux alongside your current setup. So my advice is to put Linux on its own computer. And it doesn't have to be the world's greatest computer. It can be that old computer you have in the closet that you stopped using when you bought your current machine. It could be a laptop that you picked up from a friend or a family member or something you bought at a second-hand shop. It really doesn't matter. Anything built in the last 10 years is going to happily run Linux, and it will probably run it well enough for you to learn how to use it. Some people ask, well, what about a virtual machine? That's where you can run an operating system on your current computer as a program running in your current operating system. Yes, VMs are very cool, and they can teach you an awful lot, but they can only take you so far. At some point, you're going to have to put Linux on bare metal to get the full experience of how it works. Now, this is always very controversial, and it always generates a lot of talk in the comment section. I do not advise people to dual boot their computers. If you don't know what a dual boot means, that means that you have two operating systems running on the same machine, and when it boots up, you choose whether or not you would run Windows or Linux, for instance, or Mac and Linux, or whatever's loaded on it. Dual boots are fine for people who have a very good understanding of how it works. In other words, they know how a computer boots and how all that happens. And there's always somebody that comes along in the comments that says, well, dual booting's not that big a deal. I've done it for years and I've never had a problem. That is probably because you understand how it works and you know how to manage it. Most people who use computers don't. And it's for them that I say, don't dual boot. Don't let somebody come along and say, well, I'll help you get started with Linux, and they install Linux on your computer and they set up a dual boot and walk away. Because if you get an update on either Linux or Windows that somehow trashes the other system, you're not going to know how to fix that. It's very common for Windows updates to come in and rewrite the bootloader, and if it does, the next thing that happens is that your computer no longer has Linux on it, and if that's what you're using almost exclusively, then you're going to be in big trouble. So I just say stay away from that and just keep it on separate computers. Period. Keep your present system up and running. Like I said, don't erase it and start over with Linux, because you really need to give yourself time to learn. I put that down at the bottom, but here's where I need to say that, is the fact that you yourself are going to take some time to get accustomed to Linux. There are things that you're doing on Windows that you might not immediately find a direct alternative on Linux. For instance, if you play a lot of games, you have titles that you're playing on Windows. They might not necessarily be available on Linux. And you don't want to just dump your games. You put a lot of money into them and you like to play, right? No problem. Keep your Windows machine. Move your personal stuff off of that machine, put it on your Linux box, and then use your Windows machine as a gaming system. There's nothing wrong with doing that. I myself, the Linux guru who is making this video, am sitting in front of a Windows 10 computer. I have this computer because of my job. There is software that we use in the radio station that runs exclusively on Windows. It will not run in a virtual environment. It needs to be on hardware. And we have a Windows shop. So therefore, when I log in to do my show, or to dub music into the system, or produce a commercial, or whatever I have to do, I'm doing that on Windows. But I don't have any personal information on that computer. It's a work computer. And I don't have it on my network either. When I want to take data from my Linux machine and put it on my Windows machine, I actually put it on a USB stick and unplug it and put it in there. That's how I do it. So in the real world, you may have to continue running your Windows system or your Mac for quite some time. Whatever you do, make frequent backups of your data. This is so important, especially on your new Linux system, because you're going to, at some point in time, bork up this system. That's what we call it. You borked the system. And that just simply means that you killed it. It's a brick. It won't work now. And the only thing that you can do is reinstall. And in that case, you want to be able to get back to where you were as quickly as possible. That's why you should keep backups. Now, I am not a fan of commercial backup software. I have written a lot of backup software. I have a script called BU, which is short for backup, or backup USB. And that will back up an entire Linux system to an external hard drive in a plain and open format. It's not in a special container. A lot of commercial software has these special encrypted container files, and you can't use them unless you have the software. And then there are people who try and back up their system using some sort of cloning, like Clonezilla or something like that, where you clone the entire drive. That is really a cumbersome way to back up a computer, and if you have to change hardware, that can cause all kinds of problems. And it's not the most reliable for getting back to where you started from either, just to let you guys know. So when I say make backups, I'm talking about just copy the data over to a USB drive or something like that that's offline in a way that you can get to it from all of your systems. Just that simple. Now, once you've got that in place, then you shouldn't be afraid to experiment. You can try to customize your system or learn more about it or enhance the performance without worrying about screwing it up. You don't need this every day. And there's not a Linux user on the planet who hasn't sat there and watched as their entire system just goes away because they put in the wrong delete command in the terminal, or they deleted the wrong file, or installed a program that didn't work right, or whatever. It happens. It's okay. Be prepared for it. And of course, give yourself time to learn. It's very important. A lot of people get frustrated with Linux because they try and go too quickly. They're trying to get ahead of the system. They're trying to manipulate it. Give yourself time to learn. Just give yourself a running system that you can poke around with and play with for a while that isn't mission critical, that you don't need to get your work done every day. Give yourself that time to play. That's the best way to learn. And as you become more comfortable with it, then you can start relying on Linux more and more and more. People ask all the time, there are so many different distributions of Linux. What Linux distribution should I start out with? Now, over the years, I have whiffy-waffled back and forth on this, and at different points in time, I have recommended flavors of Ubuntu and Linux Mint, but these days, I'm back to recommending Linux Mint just 100% all the way. And the reason is because I have been using Linux Mint for almost a year now on my daily driver machine, and it has been so stable and so impressive that I really think that this is the best way to go in the current environment. So what are the good things about Mint? First of all, it's very easy to use. The desktop, if you download Cinnamon version, which is the one that I recommend for just about everybody, is going to be extremely familiar. This is stuff that you know how to do. If you've used Windows or even Mac for years, you're going to sit down in front of one of these Mint systems and you're just going to be able to use it. It's not a problem. You're not going to think twice about it. When you get Linux Mint installed, it is a fully functioning system with all of the software that you need to do basic things. Like you get the entire LibreOffice suite, and things like the dictionary and the thesaurus are already enabled and turned on, so you don't have to worry about doing stuff like that. And a lot of the deeper systems stuff, just little tools and things that don't come included with like Ubuntu and some other systems, they're going to be there and they're going to be configured for you. They're ready to go, which is really nice. You get a full kernel stack in there with a development. So if you're going to be compiling programs at some point, it's already there for you. You don't have to set that up. It's very nice. Mint is all point and click from the moment that you install it. And this is a big point for people who are just starting with Linux. Some people are very intimidated by a terminal. They've heard, oh, to use Linux, you have to type commands in at a terminal, and it's very cryptic and it's hard to do. And some people get very indignant about it. They're like, why should I have to use a terminal in 2021? It's stupid. I'm not going to do that. Well, you don't have to do that. Mint is point and click, but there's a caveat to that, and that is if you ask me for help with your Linux Mint setup at any given time, chances are I'm going to have you open up a terminal, I'm going to tell you a command to type in, and I'm going to ask you what you see on your screen. Because that's how I approach the system. And that's how many people who are going to be helping you approach the system. So what I always tell new users is, get a nodding acquaintance with the terminal. You don't have to be super proficient at it, but just kind of understand how it works. Because if you need to repair something or you should need to do something, you want to be prepared for that. Got a wonderful video on this channel called Beginner's Guide to the Bash Terminal. And for you pedantic people out there, I know that Bash is not a terminal, it's a shell. But that title is for searchability, not for perfect phrasing, okay? So don't give me a bunch of crap about that. Now, Mint is very well documented, and that is another reason. You can go to the Linux Mint site. I will put the link in the description, and you can download their user's guide, which is not very verbose, and it's pretty easy to understand, and it's a PDF, and you can sit down and read it before you do anything, before you even attempt to do anything with it at all. So that's nice. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a large community that's willing to help you with Linux Mint, and there's a lot of great information out there on the internet. Mint upgrades are super easy, especially within a release number. So right now we're on Linux Mint 20, and I think we're on Linux Mint 20.2. So if you install Linux 20.1, when it comes time to upgrade, it's really just point, click, walk away, done. And I installed Linux Mint 20 when it was brand new, and I have not upgraded the system, nor do I see the need to do so. Linux Mint 20 is doing just fine for me, and I don't need any of the features that have come along in 0.1 or 0.2. So it's entirely up to you. Now, when Linux Mint does a major upgrade, and that would be going to Linux Mint 21, they'll still provide an upgrade path for you. It might not be quite as easy as point, click, walk away, but there will be a way to upgrade the system in place. And that is something they've been offering for a while now, since Linux Mint 17. And it's very nice. Much older versions of Linux Mint, the only way to move from one number to the next, one major number, was to reinstall, but that's changed now. And Linux Mint is super stable. It has been a wonderful environment to work in over the last year, and I have been using this every day for work. This is the computer that I use to write copy for things that I do on the air in my other job at the radio station, and do research and a lot of web work, and of course web administration. I have a website and email, and I've got all kinds of stuff that I do with Linux Mint. Manage my music collection with Linux Mint, and create music files that go into the automation system for the computer. There's all kinds of crazy things I've done with this machine, and it's not even blinked at me. It just works. So that's another reason I'm recommending Linux Mint. Finally, let's talk about asking for help. So you got yourself installed, you got yourself set up, and you come across something that you don't understand. How do you deal with this? Well, first of all, as Spatry used to say, for those of you who have been around YouTube and Linux for a while, you'll remember Spatry. Mr. Google is your best friend, all right? You do a search in Google, and chances are you're going to find the answer to the question. And you have to be creative with your searches, and you have to choose your words carefully. If you put in 3 words and you wonder why you don't get help and it's nothing there, and then you get all upset, it's because you're not being specific enough. So for instance, if you wanted to install Linux on a particular Dell computer, I would tell you to go to Google and type in install Linux Mint Dell name of machine, whatever it is, right? Chances are that's going to bring up forum entries, all kinds of stuff. People who have done this before, threads. You can read through it. You're going to find out about how that works in case there's any hardware driver conflict thing you got to deal with. Whatever the deal is, you're going to find out about it. So that's the kind of searches you need to learn how to do. The next thing that you should do is join the community. Join the Linux Mint forums, or whatever distribution of Linux you happen to be using. Be a part of it and ask questions. There are people there who are very willing to help you. And unless you come across some sort of bug that's unsolvable until they fix the bug, most of the solutions are pretty easy. Now, when you do that, you need to be patient, and you need to be kind, and you need to be courteous. And you need to realize that the people who are answering your questions are doing it voluntarily. All right? If you're talking to the developer of a program that you're trying to use in Linux, chances are he's doing this voluntarily. It's not like a piece of software that you paid for, or you paid for support, so you are entitled to have support, and this support is... You can't go in there cursing the product. You can't do it. You can't sit there and go, Linux is stupid. I don't understand why doesn't this work? This is dumb. Whatever. No. Be kind, be courteous, and realize that you're speaking to volunteers and that what they're doing is a labor of love. And if you do that, you're going to have a lot more success getting your problem solved. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't people in the community that aren't very nice. You're going to come across those people occasionally. And if you do, stay out of the drama. Don't start a bunch of crap with them. There's always some drama going on in the Linux community. This is from hard-won experience. I used to get caught up in the drama myself. I don't do that anymore. I stay out of it. I let the people who want to do drama, and then I do what I need to do. So just move on and find your answer elsewhere, and don't worry about it. Whatever you learn, document it. Keep notes, whether that's physical notes that you write in a notebook, or what I do is I open up the text editor and copy in all the commands and instructions that I need to get this done, and then I throw it in a file and then throw that in a directory I call Linux Notes. And one of these days I'm going to do a video where I don't do anything but just go through all of those notes. I would like to post that sometime just for funsies. I've been thinking about doing that video. If that sounds like a good idea to you, subscribers, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see the Linux Notes video. where I just talk about problems that I've solved through the years. It's a great resource later on, because if you come upon the same situation and you find that you need some command or some tweak, there it is. You've documented it. And finally, give back however you can, because that's what keeps the community going, is people contributing to the community in one way or another. That could be a little money out of your pocket for the distribution you use, like Linux Mint, you send them a little donation there. Or maybe there's a particular piece of software that you use on Linux that is important to you, and the software developer has a web page where he asks for donations. Throw them a bone, man. Give them a little bit. And if you can't do financial things, you're just too poor to do that. I understand. I'm in the same boat myself. I would love to dump a lot of money into the community, but I can't. So my contribution is things like this, what I'm doing now, just sharing my knowledge, getting it out there, and saying, okay, this is my experience. Share your experiences. Blog what you do. Some people blog their Linux journey and they share as they go along. It's wonderful. It's kind of old school these days. We don't hear a lot about people blogging, but it's a good thing to do. And there's a lot of good information in those sorts of blogs as well. So I hope this video helps. I hope this points you in the right direction. Cannot wait to read your comments and hear what you guys have to say about this. And yes, it is sort of a way of me kind of starting over. I'd like to become more involved with the community. I took some time away from the Linux community. There was some negative things going on, but I'm starting to think that maybe that has kind of run its course and things have settled down. And I think it's time that we turn the page and start a new chapter in the world of Linux and welcome some new blood into the community, new users here, and just keep on going. Thanks for watching.
Any comments? I want to pause here because I want to make it clear. I have, in my research, developed a technique that gets me tons of information. I've probably farmed here in a little over a week over 200 videos and other support documents. One thing you want to do with YouTube in particular is scroll down. You will see show more. Always look at it. Sometimes you get extra things in there, including downloads that you might want, or links to other sites, etc., like his primary site. There's another guy in here with some videos called Chris, and he seems to be great too. Keep going down the list. These are comments. This one video alone has 125 comments. I do a brief read through them. Why? Because periodically somebody will make a post and they will supply you with some additional information to go look somewhere else to get information you're looking for or that you find of interest. The second thing that I do is, you got all these here. In my handout, this JC Notes, which is what he alluded to here, is included in my notes. I go through here looking at every last one of these here, and I will do a right click and put a new tab up in my browser. When it gets to a certain size, I have to start a new window and keep on going. And I've got tricks that these are features that I added to my browser that allow me to do extreme things. I have probably right now on a 2 gigabyte machine in excess of 200 videos across about 6 different windows, but you can only see 4 of them. And I'm gonna try and this is not always the best system. Shut up. I got a cat here that's drives you nuts. Oh, shut up. Trying to find something in here that I'm not going to find it. Anyway, you'll just have to take my word for it. This is an X Chromebook. I did a BIOS update with Mr. Chromebox. It only has a Celeron 1.4 gigahertz processor. It has 2 gigs of memory, 16 gigs of storage, and I can do wonders with it. And most people would have said it's a piece of junk and thrown it away. That's not me. That's part of the reason why I got so many damn machines to begin with. And that includes people that I help out. They don't know what to do with their old system. They end up giving it to me quite often. I got to get into at least one more of these videos, and there's a reason for it, especially if you're going to be on a laptop. Linux is a power hog on laptops. Period. They don't have the finesse of Windows and or a Mac OS in being able to conserve the energy stored in the battery for as long as possible. And I'm complaining about Windows systems that if you're lucky you get 2 or 3 hours only. Well, on Linux you might get even less than that. So I've got now this is for the absolute beginner. I'm going to skip that one. Saving power on a laptop. I got several in here, along with some reference material.
That may be the reason that I crashed on my laptop. I had to go over to my iPad.
I guarantee you it is exactly that issue. And I'm not joking when I say that. However, one of the tools I cannot show you because I haven't been able to get it to work. I came close on one machine, but there was at least one little piece missing, so I couldn't get it to work.
Linux and laptops.
Here's Chris.
One of the things that's almost been like oil.
This is a good guy too. Joe and Chris are a couple good ones.
In water, because Linux, the one downside when it comes to laptops is it's extremely power hungry. And that kind of sucks because you'll drain your battery in like an hour or two if you just leave it on stock settings after installing Linux, where on Windows it'll go 10 hours, which is fine. But there's packages we've done in the past, and I've mentioned them. There's TLP, which you could still use, but you get rid of turbo boost, so you lose a little performance. Then you also have something called indicator.cpu or something like that. It was a frequency package where you could select your frequency or go, instead of going performance mode, you could go power save mode. However, I didn't really like this package. It felt clunky. And then on top of that, you could do power top, auto tune, and just set that up as like a system D service. All these solutions suck. I hate them. It always feels better when I'm in Windows, and that is just not acceptable to me. So with anything in Linux, we can fix it. There's always some genius out there that creates a package, and that's what this video is about. So let's go ahead, jump on the desktop, and I got something special for you today. over here, we have the old K-Focus. I did a video on this back in December, and I have been using the crap out of this laptop. It is by far the best laptop I've ever had in my life, and I just have fallen in love with it and use it on a daily basis. So this is the laptop we're going to use. If you want to see that video where I review this entire thing, by all means, I'll try and link it up here. But this thing with this package gives me the best performance, and I get the best battery life, and I can do anything I want, which is just amazing. I've always hated laptops, but this thing has made me love laptops for the first time. Enough talk. Let's get on the desktop and get into it. Okay, so the package I've been talking about is Auto CPU Frequency. And this right here does pretty much everything that those 3 other packages did. Power top, the frequency where it would change the frequency of the CPU to try and save battery life. And you can even use this with TLP. It actually works great in tandem with TLP if you want to squeeze that extra performance. Me personally, I just uninstalled TLP just to see what it would do, and I still get a good 3 to 4 hours worth of utility out of my laptop with TLP off, because I want that extra boost clock. I want to squeeze every bit of performance I can out of the laptop while I'm using it. But again, if you're using just light office work, you probably want TLP installed. However, I do like to get some beefy games going because there is a 2080 Super in this sucker. So with that, over on my actual terminal, you can see what Auto CPU Frequency does. Now, there's multitude of ways to install it. The easiest way is to use the snap, which is snap install auto-CPU frequency. And you just type that in, go for it. You might need to use as sudo, but I'm personally not a big fan of snap packs, so I actually built and installed it by just following the how-to article over here. So depending on your level of skill, you can do either or. And you can see here's the Snap Store, or you can just go ahead and build it from this installer right here. They make it pretty easy, so if you don't like snap packs, by all means, just run the actual installer and it should work just fine. Or for you Arch and Manjaro users, it's in the AUR, so just use the AUR to install it, which is great. Now, to see this, you can actually do a live view of it, just so I can kind of show you what it's actually doing. And why Windows works so well is it's changing your clock speeds as you're using the operating system. And here, if we do a live, and I just hit enter, you'll see the live mode. And right now I'm using it as a daemon, so it won't actually show it. But before you install it as a daemon or a system service, you probably want to do live mode just to kind of check it out, see what it's doing as you're using your computer. So we're going to just use stats, but you could do an install to install it permanently on your system. But since mine's already installed, we're just going to hit stats, and then it'll just sit here and refresh. Now it's right now setting as a performance governor. And as I use this, it can actually switch to power save mode. So if I'm not using a lot of things on my system, it'll actually go ahead and switch it to a power save governor. Now, since I'm streaming directly from my laptop using the 2080 Super, there's a lot of things I'm actually using this laptop for. Well, that's why it'll switch between the two. But it also kind of depends on what I'm doing. Look, I'll unplug this. Hit OK. Let's see what it does when the battery itself changes from charging power, because if it's in the power, you want as much performance as you can. Going to battery powered, let's see what happens. And as soon as that happens, you can see it just go to discharge, and then it goes, hey, you're on battery now. Well, I don't want to just kill everything using the performance governor, so it auto switches to the power save governor. And you can see the down clock happening up here as well. So this is like a 3-in-1 tool. And again, if you don't want turbo boost, just install TLP and this will actually increase it further. However, again, I don't use any of those old packages. So if you're using Linux on a laptop and you have all that crap installed, just uninstall all of it is my recommendation. Install Auto CPU Frequency because it's going to change your life. As far as using Linux on a laptop, this thing now can go upwards of 12 hours because I'll go ahead and switch from my NVIDIA, shut off my dedicated graphics card in here, and just go run off my Intel chip, and it can go 12 hours or even past that now because of all these power saving tips that's happening. So if you're using Linux on a laptop, install this package immediately. Remove all the other ones. I recommend just removing TLP, seeing what happens with your laptop. And then if you need it, let's say you're really just using office work, you don't need all the performance, go ahead and install TLP and use it in tandem with this package. However, I've found just running this package by itself is enough. And it works fantastic. I can game, I can do all that, and still get several hours of usage out of it without burning up the laptop, which is great. So I just wanted to bring this to everyone's attention. No longer does Linux suck on laptops and just suck all the power out of the laptop. Just install this package and away you go. It's fixed. I've used it on Debian, I've used it on Arch, I've used it even on Rail-based distros on the laptop, and it works great. So with that, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. Did you know about this package? Let me know. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.
Now, I don't disagree at all with what he's saying. I've been trying to get this sucker to work, and I just have had zero luck. So I have TLP and PowerTop installed.
Today's all about laptops, and I got a couple.
Yeah, quiet. All right, I get good performance out of my system. Now, down at the bottom here, I've been running this since about 623 on battery, and it still says I got 42% of my battery left. I ignore the time it says that I should be able to run because I don't totally believe what it's saying. But I went in 2.5 hours down to 42% from a full charge. That isn't half bad. And at that rate, I could probably go 3.5 to maybe 4 hours on what amounts to a cheap Chromebook. Now, the bad part, we don't have time for me to kind of demo those two utilities. I only have them on the laptops. I don't have it on my desktop that's here too. TLP. There's two packages you can do from the command line, a sudo apt install TLP space TLP dash RDW, I think it is the 3 letters. There's in the document that I put out on the chat in the PDF, you'll be able to find that. Then there's a standalone article from Sunrise Computing, and it has an easier way of installing a third TLP UI for a user interface, a GUI, so that you don't have to, from the command line, go into the config files, try and understand them, and change settings in a text file. The GUI gives you a normal GUI desktop interface and makes the whole process of making changes easy. My suggestion, change very little in the beginning, just install it, run it. You have to do an enable a start of the process, and then there's additional features that are in the rest of the document. On PowerTop, this has, you use the tab key to go across 5 or 6 different categories. Mine laptops, being old Chromebooks, only have 5 categories. The 6th one might be on a regular PC laptop. Bottom line, in the 5th category, it shows bad and good. Anything bad, just click on it and then hit the enter button. It'll change from bad to good. It means it turned off a feature that is sucking up resources that will now sip or use no resources of the battery because you're not using them. That's why they are classified bad initially. So those 2 tools do work. They will extend your battery life quite a bit. I hope I'm working on a PC that I will install Mint on and try and get Auto Dash CPU Freak on it working because I think it's the better package, and I may not bother with TLP or Power Top, but odds are I'll still play with Power Top because I can turn off bad features that may still suck up energy and give me nothing in return. Now, when you're playing with the converted Chromebooks like I did, you can't boot up a USB drive. It doesn't let you. You have to hit the escape key on the initial boot screen, and that'll get you into what is the closest thing to BIOS. There, you have to go into the 3rd function, and I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's adding features. And if you got your USB plugged in, it'll be one of the items listed. You click on it, it'll add it to the boot menu, which is the 2nd item. When you click on boot menu, you can now select your USB drive and boot up off of it. So that's a little trick there from a regular PC. If you got a regular PC, you got a regular BIOS, you should, even from just using Windows, be able to get into the BIOS and make sense out of a lot of what's there and make changes to allow you to do things or stop things that no longer apply under Linux. So I hope all of you got something of value out of the meeting. Granted, I gave you a lot of information. It's the way I work. When I do research, I find lots of things that either interest me or this is another side topic from the main one I'm looking for, and I want to keep all that information, and I just keep accumulating. This is how I do the more FYIs. I got umpteen sources of information, and I farm out articles galore, and then I put posts together with at least 4 or 5 entries per more FYI. This is how I disseminate a lot of information most people haven't got a clue about to begin with. And a lot of them complain, oh, it's too much. If you say, I got to look at everything there, yeah, it's too much. If you say, I'm going to look through the list and see what's of interest to me and look at those first, then I can look and explore other things that seem somewhat interesting, start reading them, and I can quickly determine, no, this is not what I'm interested in, or yes, I'm very interested, I'll read right through it. And I keep those around. I don't like bookmarks. I use the tabs in the browsers with my browser tools as my bookmarks because I have a way of knowing exactly what tabs are in each window and what the topic is, because that's one of my other tools. It also gives me a backup. And on Chromebooks, there is no normal backup. So you got to think outside the box to figure out new tools that can give you a backup so you don't lose everything. Because if you're not careful on a Chromebook and you're like me, you could have a plethora of information and in a blink of the eye, it's all gone. All right. Anybody got any other questions or issues?
Good meeting.
Well,
Excellent meeting.
Excellent.
If we went through all the videos and that, we'd be here till sometime tomorrow morning when I want to fix breakfast.
Well, you picked some real good ones, though.
Yeah, I was surprised at some of them that I came across, and so I reordered some of them. There's in that list of PDF how to set up a firewall, simple firewall, and at least one of them shows you how to put a new rule in that firewall that gives it more capability than just the basics. Because not all the Linux distros come with a firewall built in. They tell you, here's the package, GUFW. Go to a command line, do a sudo apt install GUFW. It'll download the basic firewall. And one of them, like I say, it'll show you how to put in a new rule of what to allow, or you can say, don't allow this. Just be careful on the don't allow, because sometimes you exclude stuff you do want. With that, unless somebody's got something else, I think we need to call it quits since it's damn near it's already past 2:30 Central Time. I hope you guys got something out of this. And Dennis, some of the videos I did were directed right at you. I'm not joking. And it really exemplifies, you got to stick your toe in the water sometime. Yes, you're going to get some frustration. You're going to have to do some research so you don't look like a what's called a noob, N-O-O-B. And a lot of assholes, there aren't as many as there used to be. When I first got into Linux, there were a lot of assholes out there. And as soon as they detected you're a noob and you didn't do your research, you get flamed. And that's what he was talking about, the drama. Just say, well, I'm sorry I asked the question. Goodbye. And do nothing else and just leave that forum and don't return to it until sometime later. Bottom line, I ran into problems. I researched it. I got the answers. I got it fixed. That's what you got to do in Linux world. It gives you the ability to do it yourself and rely upon yourself as much as possible, and give you the power and capability of creativity on how you set up your computer and use it with Linux. And I don't know how to put it any other way.
Well, I think as one of the guys pointed out, Google is your best friend, because if you don't, all you got to do is Google, and you can find somebody else that's had the same problem.
Well, that's right. And you don't have to use Google. I switched over to DuckDuckGo. It uses all the same information that Google does without all the ads and without all the tracking. So what else? Anything?
I've got a question.
Not allowed.
Somebody about three of these meetings ago, either here or on the regular PC forum, was looking for an IDE drive for an old school box. I'm just wondering if it was anybody here. Sounds like a no. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I even have some old IDE drives, but I picked up little adapters. You take a SATA drive, you put the adapter on, you plug in the IDE cable and a power plug, and it works.
He was looking for one of the old ones for some old AT machine.
I got the AT machines galore. I just put.
No, I'm just asking because I've got some.
I just
willing
take the SATA drives because they're more reliable. I put on a $4 or $5 adapter, and it works.
Yeah.
And better performance than you're going to get out of the IDE drive, and speed. All right.
Okay.
I think we'll call it a quits then, unless somebody's got
say
something.
aloha.
All right.
A lot of good information. Appreciated it.
All right.
Okay.
Good night.
Don't forget to download the document, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure you save the doc.